Good evening. Welcome to a slightly later edition of PMQs here on Sky News, where we'll be analysing and reviewing today's Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons. And after weeks of pressure on the Prime Minister over the Home Office, David Cameron today switched his focus to trying to attack the Chancellor over tax credits.
The Chancellor is responsible, and it's come to a pretty pass when the Prime Minister can't even bear to say his name.
Well, in a moment, I'll hear the verdicts on those performances from my political pundits this week. They are James Blitz and Will Woodward. And you can also post your comments on PMQs or any other political story at my online diary. Go to Adam Bolton weblog at www.sky.com/Sky News. Click on the link. First, though, the highlights of today's PMQs in Parliament.
In each of the last 2 years, almost 2 million households have been overpaid tax credits by £2 billion. Some of the poorest households in Britain are now having that money painfully clawed back. The Treasury's Select Committee says the department was incompetent. Can the Prime Minister tell us which member of the Cabinet is responsible for this piece of incompetence?
Let me just point out to him that tax credits provide support to some 20 million people in this country, including 6 million families and 10 million children. They are responsible for lifting 700,000 children out of poverty, 2 million pensioners out of acute hardship, and this government is proud of the role that tax credits are playing in alleviating poverty in our country.
The Chancellor is responsible, and it's come to a pretty pass when the Prime Minister can't even bear to say his name. The Citizens Advice Bureau says the Chancellor's system has left families in severe hardship. They say the number of people coming to help has not dropped. The Right Honourable Member for Birkenhead, who was the first welfare reform minister in this government, says the Chancellor's approach is like attempting keyhole surgery with a hacksaw.
With the greatest respect to the Right Honourable Gentleman, let me just point out to him what tax credits have enabled us to do. We have 2 million more people at work in this country. That is in part not just because of the minimum wage that he opposed, but because of the Working Families Tax Credit that makes work paid for people. And let me also tell him this, that as a result of the children's tax credit, we have been able to give help to millions of families in this country.
The Chancellor designed and administered the tax credit system, yet he hasn't made a single statement on tax credits in the last year. He hasn't answered a single oral question in the House of Commons in the last year.
We are glad that under this government, families have not just got a stable economy, but a government that backs children and families, helps them out of poverty, into work and into a decent standard of living.
Can he confirm that the United Kingdom has given no logistical support for rendition to the CIA, nor provided any information to be used in torture?
We have said absolutely all we have to say on this. There is nothing more to add to it. And I have to say, the Council of Europe report adds absolutely nothing new whatever to the information we have.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fatal stabbings are up by almost 1/5 over the last 8 years and now represent almost 1/3 of all recorded killings. 6 months ago, the Labour Party voted against our proposal to raise the sentence for carrying a knife. Will the Prime Minister now confirm that he'll support a tougher sentence, and will he tell us when it will be introduced to this House?
As I think the Home Secretary has already made clear, we will look carefully at whether we need to toughen the minimum standard for sentences for those who are in illegal possession of a knife. There are, as my right honourable friend explained when this was debated, issues to do with this about whether it's going to be possible to do this in a way that is sensible.
The Prime Minister said he would look at toughening sentences for carrying knives. Why did nothing happen then?
A lot has happened, because in relation to, well, if I can just explain what actually has happened. As a result of the introduction of the legislation, if a knife is listed as an offensive weapon, the maximum penalty for carrying it is 4 years. Since 1997, we've added stealth knives, disguised knives and batons to the offensive weapons list. We're raising the minimum age at which a person can buy a knife from 16 to 18, and there's a new offence of using someone to mind a weapon, and there's also now extra powers, along with extra resources, for head teachers to search pupils for weapons.
Would the Prime Minister now accept that my constituents are absolutely right in believing that the huge number of extra homes being foisted on the South East by the Deputy Prime Minister are going to make the current water crisis even worse?
But I just have to say to honourable members opposite that it's all very well for him and some of his colleagues to say he's against the building of new homes. Let me read to him what the Shadow Chancellor said just a few days ago when addressing something called Property Week, which I suppose are the property developers. He said this: we should increase the supply of affordable new homes. We should see if we can make new land available for development, and we should demand that developers do not simply bank it, but bring it forward for building. So I think there's a slight instance of the honourable gentleman saying one thing and the right honourable gentleman saying another.
Well, PMQ's perhaps straining to hit the mood of the day, and joining me now to assess those performances are James Blitz of the Financial Times and Will Woodward of The Guardian. James, how did you score or rate those performances by the leaders?
I've given Tony Blair 3, I've given David Cameron 3 as well, and I've given Ming Campbell 2.
So a draw, in other words.
A draw between the two main party leaders.
Not exactly the highest scoring week either.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was not a bad week for Blair, in as much as he came to PMQs without a big problem hanging over him, as he has done for so many weeks now. But Cameron, at the same time, didn't really score heavily against him.
Well, what about you? How did you see things?
I've got Blair on 4, Cameron on 3 and Ming Campbell on 2.5.
So you gave the edge to the Prime Minister this week?
Yeah, I thought that after a series of pretty dismal weeks, he actually had a bit more energy this week, and I think he got some of his mojo back.
I mean, I have to say I was a little bit puzzled, James, why Cameron didn't, for example, talk about the health service, which has really been the big political issue today, with a report from the acting chief of the health service and from the BMA.
I absolutely agree with you. That was actually the big sort of news topic. I think one of the problems he had was he started off the week with this speech about getting cuddly with the public services and being nice to public services and
he's going
nice
even
to public
further.
servants.
The New Statesman tomorrow, he's saying the war is over.
Yeah, exactly.
Between the Conservatives.
Well, when you've got that kind of rhetoric, it's then quite hard, I think, to come to PMQs and say, well, actually, there's a lot of mismanagement going on in the health service. People are getting things wrong. There's deficits. I think if he'd gone for that, I think Blair could have come back quite easily and said, flip-flop, you're getting your messages wrong, and so on. So I think that's why he stayed away from it.
Likewise, Will, I mean, they managed not to talk about the World Cup. I was pretty amazed by that, considering we were told the Prime Minister's written a letter to Sven and is going to fly the flag on match days and all the rest of it.
It was one of the few places inside the Palace of Westminster where they weren't actually talking about it today. I mean, I think it might have looked a bit cheesy to have, for Cameron or, for that matter, one of the Labour backbenchers to have gone on that.
Now, what about Ming? You both scored him in third place, so Ming is Campbell. He's having some sort of a relaunch tomorrow. He also expressed the opinion that he thought that was his best performance in Question Time so far, yet you've put him in third place. Why is that?
Well, I think he did do a lot better, and for once he actually got his sort of question out in one piece. But he still has enormous problems with his delivery. I thought it was a good subject for him to go on, a good Liberal Democrat issue, and I think Blair was a little bit complacent in the way he dismissed them. He said, we've dealt with this before, we've said all we need to say. Nevertheless, Campbell hasn't really developed it yet, so he needs to do a bit more, I think.
What would be your advice, James, for the relaunch?
Well, my problem with Ming Campbell is that at something like PMQs, I mean, he's naturally pretty good on foreign affairs and defence. Where he's not good is actually still on the domestic issues. I mean, he didn't do too badly today, but that's because he's in a sort of safe area. But when he's come on to domestic issues, public services and so on, he just doesn't sound as though they're subjects he really knows well, and that's why he's fluffed. So I think with the relaunch, in a way, he's got to be getting more onto that kind of thing.
I mean, he would say, of course, that the Liberal Democrats are changing all of their policies on domestic matters, so perhaps it's difficult to come in hard.
It is difficult. I mean, they are ditching they're ditching the commitment to 50p top rate of tax, and so they're trying to appeal a little bit more to the middle classes. They're moving a little bit away from the left, but it is pretty hard, I agree.
Well, now, interestingly, there was no discussion, really, of the whole question, which really has blown up during this short recess they've had, over the deputy leadership of the Labour Party, whether there's going to be a contest. Now, one of the things that happened the weekend was Jack Straw suggested that he was up for it, or friends of Jack Straw suggested he was up for it. Now he's given an interview to The Spectator to be published tomorrow saying that he doesn't think Tony Blair's going to stick around that long, and he's certain that Gordon Brown is going to be the next leader of the party. What's he playing at?
Well, it's not very helpful. We had a week of talk about Alan Johnson. That seems to be more or less over, and now maybe we'll have a week of Jack Straw. I don't think it's the cleverest move by Mr Straw, and it will sort of irritate Mr Blair. But I think perhaps what Cameron was getting at, say, in his question about the Chancellor today, was this sense that Mr Blair is no longer the story, that in a way he's irrelevant, and the political world is moving on to talking about who's going to replace him.
He actually says again in this interview, we're in the pre-match phase now, not the real match. He wants to play the Chancellor. But is Jack Straw credible, do you think, as possibly emerging as a deputy leader of the party?
Yeah, I think Jack Straw is credible. He's credible because I think he's got a very strong base with the party activists and also with quite a lot of MPs. I mean, Jack Straw is somebody who, perhaps more than any other cabinet minister since '97, has really worked the House of Commons. I think he's pretty respected among.
But doesn't he go down over Iraq as far as party activists are concerned? He was the...
To a certain extent, but then he modified the position considerably with Iran, of course. I mean, on Iran, he was much more the negotiator. I mean, one of the things that hasn't been discussed in the media in the last few days is that actually Straw, as somebody who was close to Condoleezza Rice and who was also very strong for negotiating with Iran, saying military action inconceivable, actually scored a significant victory by getting the Americans to turn round on that last week. I mean, Straw has actually performed pretty well in that Foreign Secretary job. So I really don't write him off at all. I mean, I think as a deputy leader, sure. I mean, I think Alan Johnson, in many ways, as the other sort of big candidate, would have to come forward and really do quite a lot more explaining as to why it should be him. He looks affable, he's got a very interesting past, former postman, worked his way up, and so on. But at the end of the day, apart from getting through the higher education bill through the Commons, there isn't a fantastic track record there.
Well, with another security breach in the House of Commons this evening, a man dropping a load of powder and implying that it could be dangerous, although the police suddenly said, security experts are saying things are too lax in the House of Commons. You work there. Are things too lax there?
Well, I am quite surprised. Before I had a pass, I used to go through St Stephen's a lot, and I found the sort of fleecing, the main entrance where that chap went through, and I actually found the sort of fleecing there quite aggressive. So I'm really quite surprised that he got through.
Do you think it needs to be a tightening of security, or is it
suppose
just one of
there
those
has. I think
things?
the trouble is, unfortunately, when you can, if you're going to make the Palace of Westminster a place which the public can go into, you can stop them bringing in almost everything. But if somebody's got powder on them, it's probably pretty hard to stop them doing that because it's terribly difficult to detect. I think that remains the big problem.
As far as I can tell, this man may have smuggled the powder mixed up in his documents. That's one of the reasons, perhaps, why it wasn't picked up. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for those assessments of the performances at Prime Minister's Questions. On aggregate there, we have the score narrowly the Prime Minister's week. 7 out of 10 for him, 6 for David Cameron, and a much stronger performance by Sir Mingus Campbell than we've seen in recent weeks. We will, of course, have full reports on his relaunch tomorrow. Sky News will be keeping you up to date, of course, on Wayne Rooney's foot and all the rest of the World Cup news. And indeed, while the Championship is on, we will be starting a little later after 9:30 on regular evenings. But please join us again next week for another edition of PMQs. And of course, join me on Sunday morning for Sunday Live, where my guests include Gaza and former President Gorbachev. Can't get a bigger mix than that. See you then. And thanks indeed to Will and James.
Surf gets rid of 99 top stains. And leaves your clothes irresistibly clean.
A little more portable. A little more sociable. A little more selective. Caesar know a little more about small dogs, so our new pouches gently cooked to bring out the refined flavour they love.
Look at that beauty. Is she smooth? Sexual like a lady. For the man on the move, man on a mission, eh, with a suitcase. You know, a man with a contact. We're in. Hell, no. That's not it. Just, hands free. Hello! You bad!
No bleeping gadgets, no nonsense. John Smith's.
Delta offers over 160 transatlantic destinations and a place of your own.
The MFI sale must end on June 14th. It's your last chance to get an extra 10% off throughout the store. So hurry, there's only a few days left.
Foot odour problem? While traditional foot sprays mask odour, Scholl Odour Control stamps it out with unique Nutra-Active sprays and odour-neutralising insoles. The Scholl Odour Control range. Don't mask foot odour, stamp it out. Scholl.
As the clock turns, National Geographic continues to grow, on a mission to engage, inform and challenge perceptions. A1, the channel that never stops exploring. It takes you to the boundaries and to the heart of the action. National Geographic HD, a purely dedicated high-definition channel. Superior sound with amazing picture quality. Experience the real world redefined. As the clock turns, National Geographic continues to grow.
Coming up in Sky News at 10, Rooney's World Cup takes off. He flies out to rejoin the England squad.
Security alert at the House of Commons, how a protester sparked an anthrax scare.
And we'll take a first look at the big stories making the morning's front pages.
First, though, here's Francis with the weather.
Mist. As seen by Qatar Airways passengers, your 5-star airline.
Got the thundery rain out here through the night, so it's still going to keep going. At least it's dried up through the Adriatic. And during the night, it's going to be a warm night right across Europe. Lovely sunshine for France tomorrow and Britain. More in the way of cloud, though, for Spain and Portugal. It's still going to be hot down there. This was a late shower. It's just now leaving the south coast. Apart from that, it's been a beautiful, dry, sunny day. And I think tomorrow it's going to be a beautiful, dry, sunny day. The low cloud may affect the east coast and the northeast just a little bit in the morning. But sunshine, sunshine, sunshine after a very warm start, apart from parts of Scotland. It looks like being 27 on the cards tomorrow. That's hot. 27 around this part of the world in the middle of the afternoon. Shade temperatures 24 midday. Looks like it's going to last into the weekend too. Incidentally, for the England game in Germany on Saturday, I would think 28, 82 Fahrenheit.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.